Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well. This Wednesday, December 6, 2023, we meet today to talk about FIL, FILECOIN's crypto. As usual, we will dissect this video into two parts. Fundamental part, we will come back to what FILECOIN is, the role of FIL in FILECOIN, and then we will go to the graphs to project short, medium, long-term on purchase prices, sale prices. Given that it could be an upcoming actor in an upcoming bull run narrative that is being prepared, we'll start right away. As a reminder, you always have the possibility of having free access to the educational course, which is a 60-hour training worth €400, which allows you to learn blockchain, crypto, investment, analysis technique, trading, everything to become profitable. Through 130 videos, 400 pages of guides, quizzes to find out where you are in your progress, and all for free. To have access to this lifelong training, simply use the platform of one of our partners. Everything is explained in the comments and descriptions. What is FILECOIN? FILECOIN is a network that allows the decentralization of information storage. Overall, it's the equivalent of a Google Drive, but in a decentralized way, and it's really based on IPS. IPFS is Interplanetary File System. It mainly allows you to store files in a decentralized way, and FILECOIN is built precisely on IPFs, or in any case, is inspired by it. Greatly on the existing stack. We don't have too much information on the existing stack. At least the first stack that was made. It was an overlay of IPFs, and therefore it was interesting to have a more standardized, more accessible, and easier to manage version. Behind it, we invented three things. The notion of proof of spacetime, the notion of proof of replication, and verifiable action. Overall, the principle is as follows. We have replication, which allows us to check that the data is instantiated in several places. We will have the notion of spacetime, which allows us to check that the data is properly stored, and that it is not altered. And then we will be on the notion of verifiable action, which is based on the blockchain, which allows us to verify whether, yes or no, the other two wheels really exist and be able to act directly. So is this of great interest? I want to tell you, on the notion of decentralized infrastructure, FILECOIN really has a lead over many people. There are other players who come in full force, for example, who can offer a lot of things. But FILECOIN really has a value proposition that is very strong because it really focuses on the pure notion of storage and storage work and the verification and replication of this storage. Is it more expensive to be centralized or decentralized? Clearly, decentralized, it is much cheaper. We are in the vicinity of 0.16, 0.17, 0.20 cents per terabyte, so which is very inexpensive when we look at the cost that we could have on a Google Drive. Yes. I agree with you. It is indeed much cheaper, but on the other hand, it is much less accessible. Indeed, if you particularly wish to use FILECOIN to store a large amount of data, you must go through an expert in your region, therefore a notion of redistributor, to be able to have access to this storage. It's not like Google Drive where you can directly purchase, download an app, and store. It's something that's totally different, and so it doesn't intensify for everyone. I think we will have to wait to have players who use FILECOIN to offer a solution that is much easier to use, and above all, much more accessible. Accessible not in pricing, but really in pure and simple use. Just having one software to install, synchronize, period. That's what we're looking for. It's simplicity. If there is no simplicity, there will be no use. Price is not always the only attraction, necessarily use. Ease of use and ease of maintenance are really important vectors, particularly in data security. The other thing to take into consideration is that decentralization is once again scary, much scarier than centralization. For companies, for large companies, the fact of knowing that we have a single and unique actor in which we can turn, we really have something which is tangible. Whereas in decentralization, we have a much less tangible, and above all, we will not have anyone to hit, and that is exactly the problem if there is ever a loss of data. Or that there is a system fault, although we know that in decentralization this happens much less often than centralization. It means that there will be no one to guarantee the proper functioning, and that is which is currently failing, and that's also why we don't necessarily have much use. Alongside in FILECOIN, we have the launch of FILECOIN, which was complicated, really complicated, in which the people who offered storage were not at all profitable. It has improved a lot, but we must also understand that at the level of tokenomics, it is felt enormously because in circulation, we have 475 million files, and next to it, in total supply, we have a little less than 2 billion FILECOIN. This also implies that the majority of FILECOINs that are available are released to pay those who offer storage here, which explains why we have storage that is so inexpensive, because we have remuneration that is also based on incentives. And that's why we have to be careful. That means that we will continually, in fact, have downward pressure, because at the same time, to be profitable, the people who offer the service are obliged to sell the remuneration they receive. Besides, we find ourselves on a diluted market cap of 87 billion, which is relatively substantial in terms of the market, but at the same time quite small compared to the prospects for development that we could have. Indeed, if we find ourselves on a FILECOIN which becomes one of the main players in the decentralization of files, and it is used by more than just Web3 companies at that time, we will find ourselves on a capitalization which will be much higher and in which there is almost no limits. However, for that it is always the same. We must facilitate accessibility, make it accessible in terms of use and in terms of costs, despite the fact and the potential disappearance of the incentive. Technically, where do we meet? Already, FILECOIN had a launch that was quite impressive with a huge candle. And then we had an accumulation phase during the period January 2021, February 2021. And then we had the explosion at the start of the bull run. And then we fell into a very slow phase of accumulation and lateralization, in which we did not have a second phase of bull run. At the end of the year 2021, we just had a small ST. For those who know Wyckoff, we have a BC, Arkansas, ST, SAO, therefore a Wyckoff distribution with the cessation of the upward trend. We retrace, we retest, we sink into the sign of weakness to make an accumulation. And in this accumulation, what is interesting to see is that we had two phases in the accumulation. We had a first phase with here, the first low phase, which was very important with precisely the implementation in place of the consolidation of January, February, March, Terra Luna, which was pressed, and then we had December 12 here, which was the sequel to FTX, okay? We had FTX, and then we had 12 December with here a breather since. So what is interesting to see is that we really have the implementation of a classic accumulation here with an SC, Arkansas, STB, liquidity intake. We retrace. We are going to retest once again, but we do not. It hasn't broken yet. We are waiting to break the 9510 to consolidate above, to say in fact that we are starting to rise again. Nevertheless, we left the lateralization zone that we had since September 2023 and then broke out on the rise with a small break of structure. Interesting, in which we had a consolidation in a week above, and we are slowly settling into it and retesting this part of the 4-6. So it's interesting because we still see a form of resilience. At the level of FILECOIN, we have not yet completely broken out. There are still many prospects, if only just to retest the upper parts here, the accumulation. And we have not left the accumulation, DE agreed. Many other cryptos have already left the lateralization zones. This is not the case for FILECOIN. After that, it's true, I agree with you, from the highest to the end of the accumulation zone. We, 370, okay? So obviously we have an accumulation zone which is very large, and behind it we must not forget that we have a bearish pressure which is always constant by the very functioning of FILECOIN and the service which is offered, and the functioning of tokenomics, okay? So it makes sense to have something that will be more difficult to leave, but we must also understand that behind us we have greater prospects for development. Indeed, if we look more technically, where can we project ourselves? We could therefore be in an accumulation phase to take on a UT, a UTAD, so that would imply that we would go and get here the $236 for a FILECOIN. What price would that imply for market supply? We would be on a FILECOIN worth more than $556 billion. It's just huge when we look at the current capitalizations. In fact, it's something which for me is a really final target if. Never have we had a FILECOIN which becomes a leader in the decentralization of storage, which I talked to you about in the first part of the video. For me, the first targets to aim for, we will rather characterize them in the form of a diluted market cap, because that is really the representation that we must have in relation to that. I think that we can quite easily fetch 40 billion in diluted market, which would currently represent X6, and then we could fetch much more technical targets, such as, for example, part of the imbalance, and going to retest the $50 at the level of FILECOIN, which would represent a diluted market cap in the region of 90 billion, which would be entirely coherent in a phase of hyperspeculation and with an increase in users. Then, can we really aim for a UST retest? I want to tell you yes, absolutely. We can aim for a retest of the ST from the moment we have a cycle that is really ball in which we have an establishment of hyperspeculation around everything that is deep in, which is the decentralized infrastructure, which is one of the potential narratives for the next bull run, and in which FILECOIN would be very well placed for that, to have a very good valuation, and in which we could go and retest why not the 120, in which we would have a valuation which would still be very substantial. Yes, but which would therefore be a potential diluted market cap. We knows that the dilution of FILECOIN takes a lot of time, and also we know very well that when we are in a phase of hyper-speculation in a narrative, the notion of market cap diluted or not loses all connotation from the moment it becomes a speculative narrative. We're done for this video. I hope you liked it. So don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It always makes me very happy, and it especially supports the work that I do, and we see you tomorrow. 7 for the Coteen to come back to the crypto news and the BTC analysis. The price analysis, of course, is tomorrow. 7.